to the Raj and Drew Show for entrepreneurs. I am Drew Jackson. I'm here with Raj Tedla, international consultant and small business leader, but also all around great guy. Raj, how you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Drew. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, we are kicking off with our series. We're calling it the 2024 Strategy Toolkit series. And we want to equip you with the tools that we use when we're working with organizations, tools that you can pick up if you've ever gotten an MBA, you've taken business classes. These are consulting tools that will really help you think through this concept or this idea that we want to share with you today called growth as a process. Growth as a process. Now just think about that for a moment. If you could process just like your accounting department has processes and procedures, just like you have hiring, onboarding processes and procedures. What if we can turn growth for our business into a process like any other process? And that's what we want to talk about. That's the concept that we want to bring to you. But Raj, I really want you to define that because I feel like I maybe put a little crumb out there, but please define for us, what is growth as a process?
So, Drew, a lot of people go back and look at growth that it comes in spurts, or it comes when you have a new product or a new service. But technically, if you go back and really look at it, you can make growth a process. There are certain things, if you do continuously every year, every month, then there is an opportunity for you to get and predict growth systematically. An example I would go back and tell people is, okay, what is that you want to think about 3 years from today, right? So have a process there. Within the 12 months, there is a month dedicated for the leadership team to think about what is that the world is going to look like 3 years from today and what do we need to prepare for. That is an event that becomes part of your process. And every year, whatever month you go back and look at it, you start working towards that. Like in the month of January, we go back and tell people is, hey, what did we learn from last year? We had a strategy plan. How did we execute the plan? What can we learn? Good, and what needs to be changed. Then you go back and look at the next 12 months and go back and say, hey, we already came up with a plan for this year. Where are the risks? Are we going to meet that thing? And go back and do a systematic analysis of that, identify the risks so that you can have mitigation plans in place. So this pre and post planning piece of it in a systematic way is called growth as a process.
Well, and some of the words, systematic, consistent, process, I'm hearing those over and over again. I'm going to ask you to kind of line this out month over month. Maybe let's do a snapshot of a year, because I think many times, whether we're talking about a performance review or anything else, personal goals, anything like that, many times what we tend to do as humans, human nature, right, is we set the goal and we forget the goal, right? We set it and forget it. And we think, I wrote it down. That's what you're supposed to do. And maybe I went a little bit further and I made some little posters that I hung on the wall of what our goals are for this year, whatever the case is. But we never talk about it again until the following year when we go into our planning phase again. And it's kind of like, did we get it? Did we not get it? I don't know. We'll find out at the end of the year. That is probably the exact opposite of what you're talking about. What you're saying is there are strategic, almost rest points. Think about it like you're running a marathon and there's these water spots and there's maybe a shade area and there's these cooling areas, places where you can stop, think about where you're at, refocus, and go out and execute. And so the same thing is true with your business. We have to have these rest points, these stopping points that are pre-planned, that are thought through, where there are specific questions that we need to answer throughout that process. So if you would just kind of line out, what is a year, if we put in this process of growth as a process, but high level, what does a year look like maybe for one of your clients in the growth as a process mindset?
So I'll go back and give you, January is the month where small business or big business, you have at least 3 department heads or functional heads, right? However you define your team. So we go back and tell each one of them, we give them a toolkit and we call it SPR and SCR. So basically, when you go back and look at it as a strategy performance review, SPR.
Okay.
So last year we set up a strategy and what was our performance? So we look at the last 12 months. Each department will look at very closely with a fine-tooth comb for their own function and come back and say, hey, these are the 2 best practices. These are the reasons why we did this very, very well. And these are the 2 reasons why these were not really accomplished and we could not go back and look at it.
Okay.
And each department in the month of January with their teams bringing the best practices.
Okay, real quick, let me pause you. So that's what we do with our organizations that have done strategic planning before. But for the listeners, if we want to give them something they can do, would you say plan a meeting to talk about maybe what went well last year, what didn't work, and come with prepared to have that meeting? And so even if they didn't do a strategic plan for 2023, they can still have this SPR meeting, strategic performance review meeting, that people might not have as much content or material to bring to the meeting, but you can at least say, hey, what did we do well? What didn't go well? Something like that in this initial kickoff meeting, right?
Yes, that is exactly. So we generally recommend people to take about 4 hours for this session because we are
Okay.
talking about entrepreneur-led small businesses, and we don't need to spend 2 days there. It's going to be 4 days. Give them 2 weeks, send them a week. Let us say the first week, the department head or the functional head would send an email and say, guys, we're going to meet in 2 weeks. We're going to spend 4 hours. I want you to think through all of last year. Come prepared to discuss your best ideas, what went well, what did not go very well, what is that you need to change this year. And each one of the participating team members, I always say no more than 6 to 8 people max, because you want it to be a rich discussion and everybody should be open to that. So you give them 2 weeks, then people are thinking about it and they come prepared for it.
And these are people in your organization, no matter what the titles, but they lead a department, they lead an initiative. They might just lead their one self, the marketing department. It's just them. But
yes, exactly.
but
that's fine.
they have ownership over a department in your organization. You get those people together and you have a meeting around what went well last year, what needs to change. So that's great. So anybody, there's no excuses. If you're on here, you say I can't, I don't have a consultant. I haven't done strategic planning. I can't do this. No, you can do it. And you just ask those couple questions to do a review of 2023 and make sure everybody is even thinking about, what went well, what do I need to change, what didn't go well.
Yes. And the second exercise is basically, we call it execution review, SER. So we already have, so we are in the month of January and we have goals for the next 12 months. And now you go back and say, here is what are the risks for us in executing and meeting our goals? Because things can change. Whatever happens, people might have changed, whatever happens. So you're looking at your strategy for this year, the 1 year plan, and going back and saying, are there any risks in meeting this? It can be people risk, it can be financial risk, it can be market risk, environmental, whatever it is.
So we talked about SWOT in our last episode. So this might be a great application because you talked a lot about context. If you missed the SWOT episode, go back and listen to our SWOT analysis episode. But you said the context really matters. So each individual person in that strategic execution review, they could almost do a SWOT analysis on their own plan. Is that accurate?
That would be accurate. And basically, they would identify where some of the weaknesses are and how is that going to affect the next 12 months. See, remember, the focus is 12 months. Like there might be a weakness for 3 years, but it might be a strength for 1 year. So that is where the difference comes into picture.
Okay.
But they need to definitely go back, look at it and understand basically what are some of the challenges or risks in meeting current year goals. So this is where we go back and say, we have done the performance review and this is the execution review. That is where the SCR and the SPR comes. So in January, everybody's really looking at it and working towards that from a function, from a department or their roles, whatever they are. And then everybody brings their best practices and you have a bigger meeting where cross-functional teams are meeting together. So each one of them is sharing what they have learned with everybody else. And here you're taking it one level above and saying, hey, my weakness or my strength, how is it affecting your department? How is it affecting our customers? How is it affecting our market? And now you're taking it to the next level of discussion where the discussion is so rich. And everybody brings all of those things. And then as a business, as a group, now you're looking at it company-wide and saying, you know what, these 3 best practices we need to implement across all the different functions and teams. Then we go back and say, hey, this is a risk for us for the current goals. Marketing, we need to go back and really help from you on mitigating this piece of it. Or HR, we have issues here with 3 or 4 key positions here. You need to really accelerate and really bring the people as soon as possible so that we don't miss too much time. So those kind of things are happening to make sure that you can go back and rectify and fix the issues that are there in the execution piece, because now you're still talking only Feb. So I have 10 months to go back and work on my goals and make sure I meet my goals. A lot of times what happens is something tough happens, people want to change their goals. What we tell people is don't change your goals, change your strategy to go accomplish the goals. Bring in the right resources. If, let us say, HR is working on something else, we prioritize and say, you know what, you need to bring in 2 business development people and we need them ASAP today. So they focus and reprioritize their things to come here. So all of that is happening in Jan and Feb, and so that your whole plan is very well done.
Yeah.
And then March is a month. We don't tell them to do a lot more, but go back and digest all the things what we have done in Jan and Feb. And in March, did we go back and mitigate some of those things from an execution risk perspective?
Okay.
So we were supposed to hire 2 business development people. We were supposed to bring in a new product development specialist, new customer service manager, whatever the case might be. And basically the March will be, hey, we've said the Q1, everything is going fine. What is happening and stuff? That is where basically the March is. Now in April, now we focus and say, you know what, the year is set. We have gone back and said we have plans in place for the next 9 months execution. Now we go back and focus in the month of April, thinking of the 3-year or 5-year plans now. Remember, just going back and jumping to the 3 to 5 years. What is happening in the world? What is happening in our environment? How are our customers changing? What are the tastes changing? All of these things and ideas have come there, and each function, each department thinks and says, hey, these are some of the things we need to bring to the table. And basically, by the end of April, we have a series of ideas, thoughts, and then we finalize that and say, depending on the size of the company, it can be 2 ideas, it can be 4 ideas, depending on the capacity and how much time and energy they want to spend around it. So typically I tell companies, small businesses with about 30, 40 employees, no more than 3 big initiatives. And for me, I tell them to go and get a project charter. The project charter is nothing but saying, what is the problem you're trying to solve? What is the goal of this initiative? How much financial benefit? And high-level overview of saying, is this really a feasible project or not? And is there good financial benefit out of it? And what problem will it solve for our client? All of those things come into the picture in the project charter.
Okay.
And one of the best practice which we have been using for the last 6 years is, if you look at the companies, in small companies, we don't have a lot of resources. So what we have done is we started going back, and this started in 2014 with one of my clients. This was an idea. What we did was, hey, let us bring some good MBA interns. And our criteria is very specific. We want somebody with a bachelor's degree who has had 3 to 4 years of industry experience, and now they are working on a full-time MBA. The reason is we want people with real experience in the field.
Yeah.
And then these people have finished their first year MBA. They have 3, 4 years experience, and we pay them very, very good money, and we bring them for a 12-week, 10-week kind of an internship.
Okay.
And what we do is we give them this project charter, and these people have to do all the research, validate with the market, everything that they need to do. And by the end of week 8 or week 9, they make a big presentation to the leadership team, and they're going back to school. They're going back for this final year of MBA. And what happens? We got some very good validated information with all the data required for us. So we might have spent 5,000, 10,000, whatever the internship costs are, but you are thinking of a big project, and now you have validation saying, is it worth it or not? And the criteria I tell all of this, my MBA interns, is 3 things. Yes, it is a great idea. Let us go proceed. Second, basically, it's a great idea, but we don't have the capabilities to execute on it. We need to get those capabilities before we do. Or the third one, it is not worth it. We are going to get into too much trouble, too high of a risk. So I don't recommend it. One of the 3, they do that because they're giving us, and that will go back and be part of it. So April and May, you're getting all of these ideas, you're getting these internships, everybody ready. And by May 2nd week, all the MBA students are done. 3rd week, 4th week, end of May, they have it. So June and July, pretty much each one of them are working on their initiatives.
Yeah.
They're looking
I like
at all
that
of
idea.
their things.
Yeah, and the idea of bringing some interns in for a short term, the nice thing is you're not bringing on an employee that's going to be, a forever cost to your operation. You're getting valuable insights, and it's just a creative way to kind of get that information much cheaper than paying a consulting firm to come in and do all that research for you. So, and then maybe you get some great potential future employees out of this internship as well. So what a creative solution. And that's really, I think, one thing that you bring to the table big time, I like to think that I do as well for my clients, is creativity, right? You've
Yes.
got to have people on your team around your life that think kind of outside the box, think of other ways, alternative ways to solve these problems. And I think that's a great example. And I hope that the entrepreneurs listening are kind of cueing into that, that your creative problem solving as an entrepreneur doesn't end with your products. It only
Yes.
begins there. You got to think about creative problem solving internally with your own organization, because that could be the lid or the hindrance to your growth as a business. So
Yeah.
great
So
insight.
June and July is all about the interns are working with their managers, the project charters executing. And now the leaders in July, every year, some companies do it in July, some people do it in August, September. But one of the biggest thing is we go back and evaluate the complete talent of the organization. We never take the
Mm,
time to go back and look at it. We look at it from a 1 year perspective. We look at it from a 3 year perspective. We look at it from the environment perspective and say, do we have the right people to go and meet our the vision for it? Now we are looking at it
mm,
from a growth perspective.
yeah.
And then what are some of the gaps? What are some of the skills that we need to bring? So this is where generally is led by the head of HR along with the department heads. So just like the top management, 4, 5, 6 people, however they are, and all of them are sitting together, looking at their teams and coming up with a plan. And now you
Mm,
go back and look at it how the next 6 to 12 months training needs, consulting needs, workshops, hiring needs, all of that is coming into picture right now.
okay.
And that is where you want to go back and look at it from the July perspective. Now, come August, all the projects are defined. Everybody start thinking about their 3 year plan and the 1 year plan for next year. So we are almost 5 months, 4 months ahead of schedule. So
Hmm.
next January is there, but you start thinking about it in the month of August and September.
Okay.
So your first draft of the next 1 year and 3 years starts formulating in the month of September.
Mm,
Because you tried these 3 ideas, 5 ideas, you bring it up and say, you know what, this is a great idea. I want to incorporate that into my 1 year strategy. No, it takes much more funding and time. Okay, we want to integrate that into a 3 year strategy.
hmm.
And then you go through all of your planning purposes and everything else. So August
Yeah.
and September is where the first wheels are turning. When I was in GE, in September, pretty much we went back and determined what we want to do the next 1 year and the 5 years. We always used 1 and 5 there.
Yeah. Well, and I was gonna say, this concept and kind of what you're talking about with these different checkpoints along the way, and then even planning that far in advance for the next year's plan, that is very common in corporate America, right? I
Yes.
mean, that process is very, very, it's just built in. It's built into these larger corporations, but small businesses have many times never been exposed to
Yes.
these concepts and ideas or these tools. And so that's really what we're doing this series for, is look, there are tools out here that can help you better predict growth and put, like you said, growth as a process into your organization. And this is just one of those, but this is a tried and true process that produces fantastic results. So okay, so we're in August, September, and we've got our plan for next year. Now we're also executing on the current
Yes.
year all along the
Yes.
way,
Yes.
correct?
Yes, exactly. So I always keep telling people from a leadership team, it is the 70-20-10 rule. And let me
Okay.
go back and explain that. 70% your focus is on the 12-month goals. So if you look at working 40 hours, so 28 hours you're working on executing on the current goals because you are more from a leadership perspective and you have teams to work with you. So that's the reason
Mm-hmm.
why 70%. 20% you're thinking about year 2 and year 3, which is what we're talking about here.
Mm.
And then the 10% of your time is thinking about beyond 3 years. That's where the 70-20-10 rule comes into picture, which is a very, very healthy of it. And now you look at it from that perspective, you see how growth has become a process. So now come
Yeah.
October, right? October, basically the department budgets, because whenever we have a strategy plan, we need to make sure we have the funds and the money to go back and drive it. So October is all about, okay, if we want to go back and accomplish these goals for the next year, for the next 3 years, what is the funding requirement? How many budget? What is the money? All of those things come into picture. This is where the leadership team and especially the finance team will be focusing on saying, hey, this is how much revenue we have. This is how much profitability we have. This is what we need. And all of that comes into the picture in October.
Mm.
So most of the time, what happens is we have more ideas than the money we have, always. And that is what happens in the month of November is putting the final touches and say, hey, these are the 6 great initiatives. It's going to require $3 million more for us. But you know what? We cannot go back and invest 3 million. We can only invest 2 million. Then we go back and refine and say, you know what? We'll put these 2 or 3 projects on the back burner and see how things go along, and we'll work on these top 2 priorities because only we can do 2 projects for $2 million, whatever the business situation is, and then everything is finalized.
Let me pause you right there because I can hear the entrepreneurs listening in on this episode and saying, Raj, you're talking 2-3 years in advance and planning out and looking forward to, and right now I'm just hoping that you know I make enough to keep the lights on at the end of the month or the end of the quarter. How do you help? Because I know you've had to have these conversations. You've helped people that were on the brink institute this process. How do you help kind of shift that mindset? What is the benefit of shifting that mindset? I mean, if you're in dire straits, do you engage in this process or what do you do?
See, that's a great question. And Drew, even when they're in dire straits, you need to understand what is a root cause for it. So sometimes I can go back and give you one example. This was an edtech company of mine. Basically, they were very, very good. They were doing about $12 million every year. Good company, about 40 employees, 45 employees around that stage and stuff. So when we went back and looked at it from their goals perspective, they wanted to go back and be, you know what, we want to be great and we want to go back and serve all the states. And they were in only one state.
Okay.
Then we went back and said, basically, how are you going to do it? And we started looking at the cash. They didn't have the cash to expand because their margins were very, very thin. But the company was a healthy company and they were taking a lot of money and putting back into the business because it was growing in the state of it. So a situation like that for them, if they went on their own, they would have never had it. Then we went back and looked at it from and say, hey, just imagine if we are in 5 states and how much it is. So immediately the plan changed to go back and get equity investors into the company. So they went back and this basically they have grown and the company is valued approximately $80 million today, 3 years after that, because they went and bought private equity money of almost $12 million and now they are in 4 states in 2 years.
Wow.
So that is one scenario where they have a good system, they have a good process, they have good things, and you can bring in the private equity people and then you can grow the business. That is one scenario. There are certain scenarios where it is an unhealthy growth, where they're not able to pay the bills because they don't have proper systems, they don't proper processes, their market is not very good and stuff like that. In a situation like that, what I would go back and say is take some time to fix some of the issues that we have. And most of what I noticed was they were spread too thin. They really didn't do their pricing right. Or they're going after too many differences in the customer bases. So it was all over the place. So you need to look at it. And in 3 to 6 months, you can get a clarity around it. And that is where I would tell them is we need to come up with a strategy planning process first. See, this is growth as a process, which is the next level for it. So I go back and tell them and look at it from a 1-page strategy plan that comes to my mind. So establishing some of the fundamentals and the foundational work becomes very critical for them to come out of the current crisis before they have growth as a process. They're 2 very, very different pieces that I want people to be aware of it. When you are consistently doing well in what you're doing right now, and now you want to grow and scale your business, then the growth as a process comes into picture. So the one level that we need to really work on first is develop the foundation work, which is the actual strategy planning process that they need to have.
Yeah.
So hopefully that has helped clarify those 2 differences there and how you can address those.
Yeah, no, that's good. And even the SPR, the strategic performance review, is going to help that company that is struggling, that doesn't know, if next month's light bill will be paid. Getting your team together, and whether the team is just you and maybe one other person or just you by yourself, but doing that strategic performance review and saying, hey, what went well last year? What didn't go well? Because you have limited time resources. And we all do. And so I'm talking to the individual entrepreneur right now. You have to make sure that you're only spending your time on the things that are going to build your business, are going to drive revenue. And to do that, you have to take the time to think through what activities, what actions, what conversations, what type of people, what type of clients, what is working, and then what's not working do more of what's working, do less of what's not working, right?
Yes, exactly. And Drew, to add to that point, if you go back and look at it, I'm talking about the second level of clients where it is very difficult for them to pay their bills and switch on the lights and whatever you're talking about. For them, the first incident I always tell this group of people is I sit with them and say, okay, let us go back and look at what you're doing as a business.
Mm-hmm.
Who are your ideal customers? How are you serving them? What is the value proposition piece of it? What is your brand promise? What is your go to market strategies?
Mm-hmm.
Are you really providing the right products and services? Are you going after the right target? Is it too broadly defined or is it too narrowly defined? How is your
Yeah.
pricing structure? Are you geographically constrained? So these are the
Mm-hmm.
first series of questions we help them, which is fundamental to their basic strategy.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and those questions, as you were saying them, I know the strategic one page. I mean, that transitions us well into the strategic roadmap. And those are the types of questions that we ask our clients when we're leading them
Exactly.
through a strategic planning process. All of those questions that you might think, why am I going to spend time on my core values? I got to drive revenue. Well, at the end of the day, you've got to know why you're doing what you're doing, because it's too difficult as an entrepreneur starting a business, trying to make your way through, small business owner. It's entirely too difficult to do something that you don't even believe in or you don't know why you're doing it. And so that's why it's foundational in this process. And it's funny because I'll share a quote with you. An entrepreneur that I know and has mentored me says this. He says, if you start it right, it'll run right. If you start it wrong, you'll spend all your time running around trying to fix the problems. And he's talking about business. I think it applies in many areas of our life, but the same thing is true and this is your opportunity to restart. We always say every day is a new opportunity to restart. And so you can say, hey, I didn't start my business right. Maybe I did the whole E-Myth thing and I totally just did it because I knew how to make cakes. And so I started a cake company, but I realized I hate the cake business. Maybe that's the situation you find yourself in, but you won't know until you actually sit down and think through the process and ask yourself the series of questions that you just mentioned. Do you want to go ahead and give like an overview of the strategic page right now? Is that what you want to give the listeners?
Yes, I just want to wrap up the growth as a process. Now we've come back to October, November, and there the budgets and everything are finalized. And in November is where the final list of things come.
Okay.
And this is where I go back and give a lot of caution to my entrepreneurs, because they have made a decision that this is what we are working on. But most of the tendency with the entrepreneurs is the shiny object syndrome. So come February, we are working towards this strategy, and suddenly somebody says something opens up and say, we want to jump on that.
Yeah.
So what I tell people is, I don't want you to not jump on things, but really take the time to understand and say, is this really worth it for us?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it might be really worth it. But what is that we are stopping doing, which people don't do? Because I have these 6 initiatives I need to work on this year to go get my goals.
Yeah.
So if I'm coming up with one new initiative, is it in addition to the 6, or should I go back and eliminate 1 or 2 from the 6? What is my capacity? Do my people have that? That piece of it is what people miss.
Yeah.
And that is where they get into trouble. So because now, whenever you have a new initiative, you need funding, you need human resources, you need people, you need strategy, you need all of those things to go back and make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where even the strategic planning piece of it, because once you take the 2 or 3 days to strategy plan, it becomes like an anchor for your company for the next 12 months, for the next 3 years. Hey, this is what we need to do. And if you want to change, and form an anchor, lifting an anchor takes time and effort. And that is what, when we want to change something, we need to go back and look at it and really work with it.
Well, and you mentioned shiny object, and I'm an SOS, shiny object sucker, and so I can
that.
become a sucker for these things and get caught by them. And here's what I've put in place for myself, and I think it's a good kind of litmus test for all entrepreneurs out there. But if you are not willing to go through the process of strategically thinking through an initiative, then don't write it down as one of your initiatives or your goals, because you're not even willing to do the pre-work. Remember, if you start it right, it runs right. If you're not willing to do that pre-work and you think that that's a waste of time, then you're not serious about the goal. But if you're serious about the goal, you'll gladly do the pre-work to determine, should we pursue this or should we not? And if you've done all the pre-work and you determine, yes, this is a great thing and this is why we're going to do it, then you're probably going to successfully achieve it, which at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do. We're not just trying to set a bunch of goals, we're trying
Yes,
to achieve goals. And
exactly.
so challenge yourself when you get that shiny object syndrome, which make sure that you put yourself through the process of determining, is this something we should write down as a key initiative? Go through that process. If you're not willing to do that, abandon it and just say, hey, that was fun thinking about that for a couple hours. Let's keep with our plan. We thought through it. We know why we're doing what we're doing. Let's move forward.
Yeah. I'll give you one personal example which happened last weekend. So this is right out of the press. I'm coaching a CEO of a small business.
Mm-hmm.
And he has seen so much value in that. He said, Raj, I really want you to come and work with me. Instead of a fees, I want to go back and help you become an equity partner in the company. He wants to give me equity in the company.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, hey, what do you have? And we discussed about it. And you know what was interesting piece of it? I went back, and yesterday I went back and told him, sorry, I can't do it, because it was very, very enticing. But I already have my plan in place. I have what I'm doing next year, and I have to sacrifice something which I already planned for 2024 to be part of this.
Gotcha.
And I went back and I said, again, SOS, right? We're all
Yep.
good for SOS. We want to
Yeah.
do that piece of it. But I had to step back and say, where am I spending the time? What am I going back and sacrificing from 2024 initiatives to come up with this? And I could not justify any of those things. So I
That's
had to
good.
go back and say, I can only be a coach for you, but I really can't be an equity partner because it involves a lot more of my time and energy, and I have to sacrifice something else.
Yeah.
So the CEO was a little bit disappointed that I could not take up the offer, but for me, it was very critical.
Mm-hmm.
10
Wow.
years ago, I would have been there. I would have been
Yeah.
there.
Oh,
10
yeah.
years.
You're like, bring it on. Wow. That is a timely illustration. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, so that is how you go back and look at it. And then come December, basically you start communicating with everybody. Hey, this is our plan for the 1 year. These are the goals by department, by function. What are some of the initiatives we are doing? What are some of the things that we need to work on and improving? Some project charters. All of those things are done in December, and everybody has to be very, very clear before they go for the Christmas break, so that when they come on January 2nd or 3rd, whenever the first working day is, they're not coming and saying, what are we doing? But they know what to execute.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the reason. And now, if you go back and look at this process, every year it reports. Come January again, you go back and do your SCR and SPR at the functions and department level. February, as a company, you're doing this piece of it. In March, you're reviewing your first quarter, making sure everything is fine. Then you move on to your 3-year plan again. And then basically you start that process. Come June and July, you have your interns, you have your project initiatives, everything else that you're working on.
I like
so
it.
The whole thing. So
yeah, and you get into that rhythm. It's going to take a
yes,
little time. It's going to take a little time, but you get into that rhythm. And I've seen organizations thrive with this process, and really just from a communicator standpoint. You know this. If you're gonna give a training or a speech, the best thing to do is get your outline completely done and then set it down. Let it rest for a little while, because
yes,
your subconscious mind, your brain is going to be working in the background. It's going to be taking real life experiences and illustrations or new thoughts and concepts and ideas, and it's going to naturally just add them, and then you'll add a little bit more to your outline, and it's going to make it that much better. But it's that seasoning. It's that, just like slow cooked food tastes better than microwave food, right?
yes,
And
always.
if you take the time to slow cook your plans and have growth as this process that is little by little, we season it a little more, we spend a little more time thinking into it, and then we go back to the day to day, and then we engage in this planning, and then we go back to the day to day. And all of that data and that information that you're collecting along the way is going to give you a rich plan that is not superficial, not surface level, but it's really been thought through, and it's been kind of filtered through the culture of your organization and the competencies of your organization, so that you have a greater chance of actually executing on it.
Exactly. Drew, that is the reason why it is something. Basically, every month you have a purpose. What is the outcome? Who is responsible for? That is how you have in your growth as a process. And it is a repeatable process. You keep on doing, you keep on tweaking if there is certain things that you need to change. Like one of the example I'll give you is, I have a couple of customers who work and support the government piece of it. So the government business is different from a regular commercial business because their fiscal year ends in September. So we took the same plan, but we completely customized it for them. because in the month of basically August, July and August, they are so swamped. They don't have time even for their coaching calls. They go back and say, Raj, 2 months break, we'll come back to you later.
Wow.
So we go back and take it. So whenever you have a company which is a slightly different and unique, we can take the same plan and customize it to their requirement as well.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add that because this is a great process, but can be customized to any business cycle that you're working with. Like in India,
absolutely.
when we work with it, it starts in April and ends in March because their fiscal year starts April 1st and it ends March 31st. So we take the same thing, what we do in Jan here, we do that in April in India.
Perfect. Yeah, you can move it around. Like you said, the first quarter for a government entity is going to be September,
October, November, December.
October, November. Yeah, October, November, December. Thank you. That's going to be your first quarter in your organization and so on and so forth. So great, customizable. Well, I know we got to go soon. So let's do high level strategic one page. You hinted at it, some of the questions, but let's frame it this way. Someone is a listener on there, they've never done strategic planning. What are some of those high level questions that we want them to think through that they can go and take back to their team today if they wanted to, or play this podcast episode for their team? What are some of those high level questions that we go over in a strategic page?
So I would go back and start with trying to understand what are their core values, what is their purpose, what is their vision. So basically, there is a lot of debate around purpose versus mission. For me, I use that interchangeably, and that works very well for me and my clients. So I'm upfront telling that piece of it.
Yeah.
There are certain nuances and differences. I'm not too much worried about it. From an entrepreneur perspective, they really don't care. That is what I learned from a lot of my experiences. So think of that person, 3 to 5 values. Why are you in business? Purpose. The vision, where you want to be in the next 5 years, 10 years.
Yeah.
Then think of it and say, what are the 3 to 4 complete solid strengths of your business? What are you made up of? What is your strength? We call them strategic anchors. Then as an organization, as the founder, as the entrepreneur, what are you passionate about? So there might be a lot of business opportunities, but if you're not passionate about the cupcakes example you're talking about, just because I love to eat cupcakes doesn't mean that I need to start a bakery and be a cupcake manufacturer. I love to eat, but I don't like the work to do. I meant to spend the $3 and get a beautiful cupcake. So that is where you need to be passionate about. And one thing I tell people is, even if you're doing it for the first time, you might have it or not, think of BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal. And this is a goal where you want to be from 10 to 30 years. And the reason I tell this is very important here is, and I'll answer the question you were asking a few minutes ago, is basically directionally, you want to know which way you're going. All your 1-year plan, 3-year plan, 5-year plan, whatever you're doing, that will be your North Star and it'll help you to guide through that. That's the reason why BHAG is very important.
Yeah.
And basically, when people are struggling with lack of cash because of their process issues or because they're growing fast enough, that vision will keep them going towards that.
That's
and
great.
That is one of the biggest pieces of it from a BHAG perspective that people need to understand. So these are something once you do, every year you revisit for tweaking it, but you're not spending too much time. First time, it takes time. But after every year, you're looking at the values and say, did something change? Did something come up? Or say, okay, you know what, this value is not relevant for us. This value is more relevant. And that's perfectly fine to go back and keep refining all of those things.
Yeah.
Then you go back and think of your customers. Who is my customer? My ideal customer piece of it. The target piece of it. And then where are they located, geographic wise or on the internet, whatever it is. Right now, you have so many different things and stuff. And what are the product and services that you want to provide? And then how are we going to the market? How are we reaching these customers?
Yeah.
And the key pieces, the 2 questions which a lot of people struggle, but very important, is what is the value proposition? Why would people buy from me and my company? And what is the expectation? What is the brand promise? When they work with Drew, what they get? When they work with Raj, what do they get? When they work with X, what do they get? So these 6 questions become very, very important from a customer point of view, a product services point of view. So first you got your values. You went and understood what your long-term and short-term is. You understood what your strategic anchors are, your strengths are. Then you're looking at it from your customer point of view. Now you go back and say, is basically, what are my 1-year goals? What are my 3-year goals? And then I bring my SWOT analysis back. So I go back and say, what are my SWOT analysis against my 1-year goals? Like for me, one of the biggest pieces of it was my sales piece of it. I'm good at sales, but I need a team to really take and meet my goals for the 3 years. That was one of the things. So I went back and hired a full-time salesperson to work with.
Yeah.
Initially, I was not thinking, and I said, you know what? This is a decision I need to make. If I need to go back and accomplish my 3-year goals, then I need to get a salesperson. Or I need to get somebody to be doing the training piece of it, the workshops and the coaching and everything else. Then I said at this time it's better to bring sales versus really bringing in a mentor, coach, everybody else to work with. So those are the decisions always constantly we are making. And based on the SWOT review, we could go back and look at it.
Yeah.
So once you get your SWOT analysis done, you go back and refine whether what you do with basically the 1 year and the 3 year.
That's so good.
And now you get your 1 year goals, you get your 3 year goals, and think what are the 3 to 5 things you need to do to accomplish those goals. So for me, one of the biggest thing was hiring a salesperson. Number 2, basically, I wanted a good content manager to really work with updating all of my basically e-commerce presence, internet websites and e-marketing, LinkedIn, all of those e-commerce, internet kind of related. That was something which I'm not very good at. So that's a big initiative I have for next year. So like that, each one of the client will need to look at it and say, what are the 3 to 5 things I need to do for 1 year perspective, 1 year goals, and what are the things for my 3-year goals? And then I take the 1 year goals and I go back and put them into which quarter, what activities I need to do. So Q1, what are the top 3 to 5 things I need to do? Quarter number 2, what are the top 2, 3, 5 things I need to do? So that would be the first time you're doing it. I would say take at least 2 days time to really understand everything else. And if you have not done it formally, you can do a lot of research on the internet to get a lot of information. But my suggestion is learn the right way and go back and get a nice consultant to help you for the first time.
Yeah.
Because especially the entrepreneur or somebody says, you know what, I've been there, I've participated in teams, I can do that. Then they're busy facilitating, not providing the inputs.
Yeah.
And that is what I tell a lot of CEOs is, I don't want you to be the facilitator. You have to contribute. You have to listen to what your team is saying. You need to go back and help them be involved in the process. So bring somebody from the outside to really help you with the first time.
Yeah.
And those
that
benefits I have seen companies who have done that with themselves and they have been successful. I'm not saying that, but it was a slower process versus who bought an experienced person from the outside to really help them and work with it. Then they have accelerated their growth much faster. So the first time it takes you 2 to 3 days really getting installed and helping your team to learn all of those things. But once you're done the first time, every year it becomes a repetition of it. Okay, what are we looking at it? And now it becomes part of your growth as a process as well.
That is so good. That's great. So we talked about growth as a process. We talked about the strategic plan and how if you just go back, listen to what we talked about, Raj talked about at the very end there, some of those questions, you begin to answer those questions one by one with your team. It's going to be energizing for your team to be able to participate in this process. They're going to have greater buy-in to the initiatives that you set because they were part of defining them and then thinking through how they are executed. And let me kind of wrap this thing up with this. So on this 2024 strategy toolkit series, we want to talk about in the coming weeks, we want to talk about KPIs, key performance indicators, specific metrics to track. We're going to talk about a pestle analysis, and we'll dig into what is pestle analysis and do I need it for my business. We're going to talk about Porter's 5 forces. And this is another framework that we're going to bring to you that's going to help you. A lot of what we do with our clients is we ask the right questions at the right time in the right way, but there are tools out there where we can give you these tools and you can begin to ask them of yourself, ask them of your own team and have a great understanding. It's almost like dissecting something and looking at it under a microscope. There's a certain way that you can cut something. I'm thinking about me. I am a meat eater, but if you slice the piece of chicken the wrong way, it's going to be a little tough. But if you slice it the right way, it's going to be more tender and juicy. And it's all in the muscle fibers and the direction they're going. Well, the same thing is true with your business. There's not just the questions that need to be asked, but how you ask them, when you ask them, what situations and scenarios. And so all of these frameworks, we're really going to, instead of just giving you a blog post, right, a kind of generic talk about these different items, we want to actually think through when's the best time. When would you use a pestle analysis? When would the McKinsey 7S framework be beneficial to your organization? We want to talk about those different frameworks and those tools. We want to equip you with the tools so that you can successfully lead your small business. And I'm excited. That's how we're gonna finish out the year. Is you are going to be 100% prepared for 2024 in your planning process. Just stick with us. Make sure you subscribe to our podcast, get the notifications when we have a new episode, because this is going to be a tremendous amount of value going into 2024 to set you up for success.
Excellent.
So I'm excited about it, Raj. Anything else before we sign off today?
Yeah. No, I think basically that's a good counter. What I just advise everybody else is just follow through the next 6 to 8 episodes, and you'll get a good insights into the toolkit that is required for you to go back and be a successful business. We are sharing a lot of these tools for everybody. Just feel free to use it. Give us a call, send us a message, connect through LinkedIn or website, wherever you are. And we are more than willing to go back and share whatever we can share to help you grow your business. We want it to be an outstanding 2024 and beyond for all the entrepreneurs.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, awesome. Well, thank you, Raj. This has been another episode of the Raj and Drew Show for Entrepreneurs. As always, it's a joy to share this information with you. I hope you're finding value with it. If you're finding value, then shoot the episode over to email it or share it with a friend on social media that you know is a small business owner that will receive value from this. And that's our hope with this initiative. So I hope you all have a fantastic day. Raj, thank you so much. And I'll see you all in the next one.
Thank you, Drew.